Yeah, I decided to frame this around what we're calling AR confidence signals. So the qualitative and the quantitative trends we're tracking that kind of instill confidence in AR and some of the business cases we're seeing. And more importantly, what are some of the kind of strategic implications? Quick bit about me, I'll go through this part quick. I'm a 15-year industry analyst, most of that time covering mobile, the last 3 years transitioning to exclusively cover spatial computing. Artillery Intelligence is your typical analyst firm. We do narrative, published narratives, data deliverables, multimedia. We have a sister publication, AR Insider, where that all kind of manifests on a daily basis, so encourage you to check that out. So one of the things we do twice a year at kind of a high level is a typical kind of analyst firm market research, market sizing, and forecasting exercise. So the most recent one, we see XR in total going from 3.8 billion in 2017 up to about 56 billion in 2022. That consists of AR, VR, and the enterprise and consumer portions of each. So as you can tell, that breaks down into so many different kind of subsegments, and we have hundreds of slides that go through all of that. Today I'm going to focus on potentially consumer AR. So that starts with kind of a familiar talking point that you've probably heard in terms of the installed base of mobile devices that really scales. In terms of just ARKORE and ARKIT compatibility, this doesn't cover web AR, which actually vaults the number even higher. We're at about 1 billion now. This is based on Google and Apple disclosures about in-market hardware, going up to about 3.4 billion by 2022. The segment of that of actual AR users, like that's the addressable market. The actual users is less, which is now at about 130 billion, growing to about 1 billion by 2022. And the biggest confidence signal, going back to that theme, that we see is the amount of sheer dollars that are being invested by the tech giants, who are, by doing so, kind of paving the roads for the rest of us. We put out a report a few months ago on this topic. I wrote a chapter for Charlie Fick's upcoming book, Convergence, that's on this topic. So through all that whole exercise, a few interesting themes kind of emerged. And one was, there's kind of a common element in the investment being made by like the big five. I have 4 of them listed here, but it also includes Microsoft. And that is to protect or to grow or to pave the future path for their core businesses. So of course that looks different for each of them in terms of those motivations. So Google, as we all know, its core business is search. So it sees AR, or visual search, that's kind of a close cousin of AR, as a way to boost search query volume, which is a key KPI for Google, and have more kind of touch points, more engagement points with users. And there's a similar motivation behind voice search and Google Assistant and a lot of things. So that's one of the motivating factors for Google. Of course, there are others. Apple, we all know that Apple's core business is hardware. It's diversifying, it's getting into software and services, but it remains hardware. But the iPhone is maturing. We all saw that in the latest quarterly earnings. Sales are maturing. So AR at Apple kind of has 2 jobs. The first one is to make the iPhone sexy again, justify premium pricing, add more features. But in the longer term, it's more important in terms of planting the seeds for a more kind of immersive feature with a kind of hardware set that includes lots of things that kind of augment us. And that, of course, includes glasses and the rumors we're all hearing about glasses circa 2020, 2021, but also other things like hearables. AR audio we're very bullish on, which is like an audio layer that kind of informs us as we kind of go throughout our day. Watches, and all of these kind of, the hardware suite that they have, they're planting the seeds with ARKit to kind of get developers kind of thinking in native ways about what to develop. Amazon wants to sell us more stuff, obviously, through a visual interface. We're seeing a lot of evidence that it's boosting conversions in terms of sales, reducing returns, which is a big pain point for Amazon in terms of like big bulky items. It's a more informed purchase. Facebook wants to keep us in its walled garden longer through visually immersive content, but also AR-related advertising. We're starting to see really develop around things like try before you buy, front-facing camera, style items. And those are really showing really strong kind of advertiser KPIs in terms of engagement and other things, and I'll go over that in a second. So the question still looms though, what will be the killer app? And I think the AR industry overall has kind of gotten flack for not really yet producing a mass-scale, consumer-scale killer app. And you can argue that Pokemon Go or Snapchat lenses, especially the number on New Year's Eve, 400 million views and 700, I'm sorry. And that's certainly killer app-like penetration numbers that we're seeing from both of those. But when we're talking about truly world immersive AR, we're not quite there yet. But our answer to that is that's not necessarily a bad thing. Killer apps do take time. If you look at historical evidence, the iPhone killer apps, after the iPhone came out in 2007, it took really until like the 2010 timeframe before we started to see things like Uber and Waze and Foursquare. So we think that it takes that same amount of elapsed time from the ARKIT launch in mid-2017 for that developer native footing to kind of really just come together. And that puts us at probably this time next year that we can start to really make that expectation. And I think that the other interesting part is that in 2010, when we're talking about these types of apps, no one was really imagining Uber in 2007 when the iPhone first launched. So I think it's going to be that same departure and that native footing that develops in terms of developers' mindsets, in terms of consumers' mindsets, for what we end up with. And I think it's very unclear what that's going to be, just like the position in 2007, 2008. But we believe there are a few kind of attributes that killer apps are going to have. One is, I like to say that utility trumps novelty. Novelty wears off. We're looking at use cases that are what I like to call all-day use cases, things that solve pain points throughout your day and have a certain propensity for a frequency of use. A few examples of that. This won't necessarily be the killer app, but some we're seeing today that hit those marks include product visualization, solves real pain points, has a propensity for a frequent use case. Another one is Google Lens, visual search. How many of you have used Google Lens? So we did a review of Google Lens and published it on AR Insider. I encourage you to check it out. We were pleasantly surprised by how well it's tapping into Google's knowledge graph and its image database to really identify items, especially kind of monetizable searches like products. And even inanimate objects like flowers. And I think that it's going to continue to train its AI to do that. It's going to be one of those kind of all-day utility-based types of use cases. Another one is VPS. You guys probably all saw Justin from Google. I was talking to him earlier. You probably all saw earlier this week the kind of 3D walking directions with AR overlays as the module as a part of Google Maps. It has kind of released that into the wild for a subset of users. And I think we're going to continue to see that develop. Where I'm really excited is the indoor use case. I think indoor, when we're talking about, especially retail environments, that's sort of this kind of untapped domain when we're talking about in-store navigation, products, product information. And Google, I believe, is salivating over this too because it's an area which represents that last mile to the cash register that is currently unlinked and unseen in a lot of cases. So it's that holy grail. And I think that Google, again, when we're looking at tech giants that are kind of paving the roads and what their motivations, I think they're going to continue throwing a lot of money at this through initial retail partners and then other rollouts. And I think it's going to be a great utility. To put some numbers behind that, total retail sales today, that's kind of a side note, are about $3.7 trillion. E-commerce is a small portion of that. But digitally influenced offline sales, so what we call online to offline commerce, is currently happening to the tune of about 1.7 trillion. About 1 trillion of that is mobile, and we believe that is where AR is going to take the biggest bite. Because when you think about that online to offline kind of consumer journey, it's very aligned with AR as a technology because it does just that. It melds the physical and digital. And in this case particularly, I think it's interesting because the item being searched or the subject, whatever the case may be, is in close proximity, which has a lot of implications for user intent. User intent is like a big word in the halls of Google, and just in terms of SEO and all the people that look at search. Other forms of search, they're always going after that user intent to increase some of those search KPIs. This is something I believe is going to be kind of off the charts in terms of those typical KPIs that kind of the search world runs on. Another key point, building blocks. If we look at historical tech kind of revolutions, we're at the stage now where we believe building blocks are really going to start to pull ahead. And these are the democratized kind of enabling technologies, doing the back-end heavy lifting, getting tools to developers. That's the type of stuff that 60 is absolutely doing. Like this category of advancing the industry by giving tools to developers, handling the back-end heavy lifting so that they can work on and focus on their kind of front-end UX. I think this is going to be an important thing to see. Another example of that is what I'm starting to call AR as a service. So one example of that is Niantic's real-world platform based on the game mechanics and the game architecture of Pokemon. It's taken all of that and kind of packaged it up as a platform for developers. And I think we're going to continue to see more of these kind of building block tools. Another great one is 3D graphics creation engines. There's Amazon Sumerian, there's Adobe Aero, and not just the creation tools, but kind of libraries and marketplaces. The AR world we envision, I think there's like a gap there in that value chain in terms of having all the 3D assets that are going to populate all these experiences. So we believe this is a major opportunity. And that's going to flow into another opportunity, which is advertising. Tom were here, he's kind of hot on AR ads these days. I hear him kind of talking and writing about it a lot these days. We tracked the spending that was done in 2018, which was about $418 million. We see that growing to about $2.6 billion, which is still a drop in the bucket in the overall global ad spending, but it's going to grow quickly. Right now, that's mostly, the spending so far is mostly Snapchat lenses, branded lenses. We believe Facebook is going to take a big bite out of that. They're a little bit behind, but due to their operational scale, they're going to take over a lot of that spend, we believe. Google with kind of visual search, that's a little bit further behind in terms of monetization due to its complexity, but that's going to start to kind of grow in terms of share here. And it's already working. This is a key point. So we've done many case studies on different AR ad campaigns. I won't read through all these, but we decided to kind of put it all on one slide. The key column is this right-hand column where it's kind of the advertiser ROI and KPIs. In some cases, we're getting a 10x delta in terms of some of the key performance metrics like consumer engagement or conversions. By the way, I can make sure these slides are available to you guys. I know it's a lot here, and I'm going fast. Another kind of business model validation. Pokemon Go has been $2 billion today. Now I think it's actually up to $2.2 billion. And most of that, interestingly, has come from in-app purchases. We're spending a lot of time looking at what users will do, what they'll pay for in this very kind of early and emergent media. And in-app purchases seems to be, due to the kind of price sensitivity that you often see in emerging forms of technology, in-app purchases seem to be a way to kind of ease users in. This is one point of validation for that. Another point of validation is what consumers are telling us point blank. We do a lot of consumer survey data where we're asking consumers what their kind of behavior is like. So I'm going to race through some of these last ones. This is actually, you guys are the first ones to ever see this data. I just got this data set back from the kind of survey being fielded. This represents a report we're going to be kind of putting out in the first week of March. But I decided to just give you guys an exclusive early look at what these data say. So this is with our data partner, Thrive Analytics. They specialize in survey research. We write the question, we collaborate on the survey, and we get the results first. Out of a sample size of 3,000 US adults, a demographically diverse sample, they're very good in survey science, they do it right. We asked several questions. So first of all, who's using AR? It's now at about 17% of the US population, which is pretty good for early stage technologies. Now that doesn't speak to frequency, that's just they have used it once. Drilling down deeper, what they're doing most in terms of formats so far is downloaded apps. So that's ARKORE, ARKIT. We believe this is going to shift over time. We're more bullish on things that are features, or what we call AR as a feature. That's Pokemon Go, it's Snapchat, lenses, it's Amazon's AR View. Placing AR in a place that is already a well-traveled app as opposed to forcing a dedicated download. I think that, I won't go on a rant now about apps versus web, but I think that the siloed app kind of paradigm of the last decade doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of AR use cases, especially when you start to get into a lot of the multiplayer things that teams like 6D are really starting to enable. That really kind of like pickup session type of scenario needs to be more dynamic as opposed to kind of stopping to download the right app and the cross-platform or interoperability with siloed apps. So for that same reason, we're very bullish on web AR. Right now it's early, and I think its functionality continues to improve. But survey respondents now are saying 16%. I've got a few more slides, Molly, is that okay? I'm almost done. I can stop. I think two more. Okay. I'll race through these. So in terms of categories, games are not surprisingly the lead, followed by social, also not surprising. Product visualization. Visual search is another one, again, I'm very bullish on. I think that's going to That's going to increase, and that's going to be the biggest mover on this slide in future waves, especially as Google starts planting Google Lens in more places. And it recently did that by putting it in iOS, right within the main app, as opposed to in the camera where it was before. I think they're going to continue to roll that out in ways that that's going to grow. In terms of frequency, speaking of frequency of use with something like visual search, the daily usage has gone down from the last wave. However, on the positive side, if you add up daily, weekly, and monthly, there are 76%, I think that's what that is, total users that are doing it at least monthly, which is really good in terms of app engagement metrics. And then more news, are they satisfied? 78% are either satisfied or not satisfied. Now I'll end on this because there's also bad news. So non-users are reporting that, when we ask them why haven't you used AR, they're reporting this kind of very ambivalent, just not interested. And I think that taken together with the previous slide tells an interesting lesson, which is that because users are loving it, non-users are ambivalent, and I think that speaks to the fact that because AR is so immersive, because it's so visual, you have to experience it to get it. And I think that adds to another challenge, which is marketing. I think that's a challenge we're all kind of dealing with. Rony Advocate said it best when he said that marketing AR is like selling TV sets on the radio. It just doesn't translate. So it's that challenge of this very immersive, very 3D thing, and communicating that, capturing it through demos. I'm sure this is a challenge you guys all deal with in terms of capturing that through 2D media. So I think that's a big opportunity to continue to evolve the way demos are done. Magic Leap is actually partnering with AT&T to put devices in stores to really just get it in consumers' hands. But I think that's a key finding. Price sensitivity, the most they pay for it. This just supports my point earlier about Pokemon Go in-app purchases. Most non-users, when asked, what will get you into AR, what will you pay for? Most of them say, I won't pay, but I won't pay up front, but I'll do in-app purchases. Among users, this is an interesting finding, but the key winner for those who pay for premium apps seems to be between $1 and $3 in terms of pricing strategies, price elasticity. That's something we'll have a field day on when we write this report. And then, just lastly, what are the things they want to do next aspirationally? Games, not surprisingly, some of the usual suspects, but one thing I think is interesting as my last kind of confidence signal, to carry that thread, is that a lot of the things people are saying they want to do map to some of those commerce-based monetizable use cases. So I think that's great that user demand is mapping to and aligning with where some of the business models are developing. And that's something that I think is going to be a good kind of confidence signal going forward for the business case for AR. So sorry, that was a lot. I raced through it, and I'll make sure that these slides are available. If anyone's interested in our data product, I won't give you a sales pitch, but if anyone is interested in a discount for attending tonight, I wanted to give you that. And I'll put a period there. I think I probably went too long.
So, I get a little volume here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so while Molly gets Dana set up, let's just take a question.
Okay. Sure.
Questions. Anybody? There we go.
It seems focused mostly on consumer markets. What about enterprise and B2B?
Yeah, I'll repeat it. So she said that was very consumer focused. What about enterprise? I think that's an excellent question. That's something we absolutely look at a lot. I think that there are different, a lot of that focused on kind of consumer adoption patterns, and some of that has to do with price sensitivity. Some of those variables are different in the enterprise. Some of the use cases are obviously different, and I think the ROI assessment is different, but everything that we look at points to the fact that the ROI case is there in the enterprise with things like error reduction in industrial environments. One of the challenges that we keep hearing about over and over again is that it's hard to make it past the kind of pilot stage and to get it past IT because of security concerns, to get it into the users or the end users within the enterprise. So I think those are the pain points, but at least the kind of first lines of defense are definitely being eroded in the enterprise. We actually see a tipping point around 2020, and I think that's a historically validated tipping point in terms of it'll follow some of the patterns that enterprise smartphone adoption went through, where it really just needs that just kind of chipping away at some of the lines of defense within the enterprise, the IT department and others, And then after that point, after that tipping point, whether it's 2020 or not, I think the key point is then we'll see like accelerated adoption, kind of like a herd mentality for enterprise adoption.
All right. Give it up for Mike.